Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The U.S. sending an aircraft carrier, warships, and fighter jets to the Middle East as a, quote, unmistakable message to Iran's regime. But so far, the White House is not saying exactly what prompted the move. Here's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo talking about it overnight on a flight to Finland.
Something we've been working on for a little while. It is absolutely the case that we've seen escalatory action from the Iranians. And it is equally the case that we will hold the Iranians accountable for attacks on American interests.
Richard Engel, NBC's chief foreign correspondent, my lucky day, joins me here in New York. Richard, I'm so glad you're here because this means a lot. What exactly is the White House doing?
Well, if you look at the political chessboard, right, I think what you're seeing here with this aircraft carrier is just one piece. And it's quite a troubling picture when you look at it as a whole. It seems like this administration is trying to paint Iran into a corner, maybe even provoke some sort of conflict with Iran. So take it one piece at a time. So you're seeing this aircraft carrier floating near Iran. That's a very provocative action. If you're in Iran, that's a very threatening thing. Then why...
Isn't that like me going 1 inch away from your face going, hit me? Come on, hit me.
More or less, yes. And then the reason the White House is saying it, and anonymous defense officials, is that they say this is to prevent Iran from carrying out an attack. So to go back to your analogy, it's putting your face 1 inch from Iran and saying, I'm doing this so that if you don't hit me or you hit me, I can hit you right back. Then look at another piece on the chessboard. The U.S. just increased sanctions on Iran, tightened sanctions on Iran, denying Iran to really sell its oil around the world, threatening Turkey, India, China with sanctions if they do any business with Iran. So you're floating this aircraft carrier in front with the threat that should anything happen to American interests in the region, we're going to whack you. You've just taken Iran's ability to earn a living, support itself by tightening these sanctions, even though the rest of the world says that Iran is complying with the old nuclear deal. Then another chess piece. Look at the timing. This comes right after the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu got reelected by the skin of his teeth. And the Saudis would like this. The Saudis are very close to the Trump administration. Bolton is an Iran hawk who is giving speeches for the MEK.
John, help me understand John Bolton as he relates to Iran.
So there are several Iran hawks, people in this administration who have for years been speaking about, been advocating for a hard line against Iran, if not direct violence against Iran and regime change in Iran. Rudy Giuliani has been one of them. John Bolton has been another. And they have spoken at gatherings sponsored by the MEK. The MEK used to be a terrorist organization. It was taken off the terrorist list. Iran certainly considers it a terrorist organization. And you go to these speeches. Generally, the MEK gives you money to appear at these speeches. And you talk about regime change in Iran. And Bolton and Rudy Giuliani have both been deeply tied into the MEK, and both have said that they have not disclosed how much they've ever taken in financial remunerations from the group.
On a 1 to 10 scale, you being someone who's covered the Middle East for years, how concerned are you about the recent actions from our administration towards Iran in terms of creating real conflict?
I think probably about a 5 at this stage. There's a lot of time between now and the next elections, just under 2 years we're looking at. That's enough time. That's enough time to find some sort of provocation, go on to a conflict footing, which may have an impact on the political conversation in this country. But if you look at this administration, which is so close, President Trump personally, so close to Israel, so close to Saudi Arabia, Bolton and others in the inner circle, this warship going there, tightening sanctions on Iran, even though the rest of the region said Iran did, the rest of the world said Iran didn't do it. It's a troubling picture. I'd put it at a 5, but we'll see.
It is Tuesday, the 7th of May of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. That's right. A little bit of smoked hot Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It will. Speaking of a difference in the world, isn't it fun rattling sabers at Iran because you're trying to wag the Stollen? Huh? My God, John Bolton and Rudy Guiliani have been paid shills for the Mujahideen People's Revolt, whatever they're called, the MEK. MEK for short. Now, of course, this organization was considered to be a terrorist organization until, well, I don't know what it is about the Republicans and the Bush family and Trump and all the rest. But they used to be considered a terrorist organization for little things like, exploding bombs on flying jetliners with people on them. Usually don't like that kind of stuff. But apparently it's okay now. And Giuliani and Bolton had been paid shills for that organization for quite a while. I mean, I got to say, it's not a secret. And now they're in the White House setting war policy. Wag the Stollen. Well, that's exactly what a fruitcake would do. And they are, except they got guns and tanks and missiles and any number of things. Oh, yeah, speaking of which, you'll see how I make these connections. Trump pardoned a former Army lieutenant who killed an Iraqi in cold blood. Dragged him out to some railroad tracks. He had been investigating him and interrogating him. Not investigating, interrogating, which means he's beating the crap out of the guy. Because he wanted to know where the terrorists were. Tell me where the terrorists are. Tell me where the terrorists are. Oh, they're over there. Tell me where the terrorists. So, for whatever reason, in spite of Geneva War Conventions and any number of rules and regulations, this guy decided, a lieutenant too, that he would drag this Iraqi out to the railroad tracks, strip him naked, shoot him in the head and the chest, or maybe it was the chest and the head. I don't know. The guy was killed by shots to the head and the chest. And it outraged his platoon and others, and he got sent to jail for cold-blooded murder. And Trump pardoned him. Doesn't really make the military very happy right now, I must say. So yes, there will be some problems here. Because has McGahn turned over the 36 documents that were demanded under subpoena? What happened to the rule of law from the Law and Order Party? Well, we all know what happened. Oh, Meghan Markle had a baby. Oh, isn't that sweet? I don't want to denigrate, people's joyous times. And just because they happen to be royals doesn't mean that they're bad people. But it is somewhat humorous to me that America had a revolution to, try to keep the idea of royalty at arm's length. So maybe admiring, the royal baby at arm's length across the oceans, hands across the water, hands across the sea. Well, maybe that is at arm's length. But juxtapose that with does Trump want to be a monarch? I don't think a monarch completely encapsulates what he really wants. And he's determined to get it. And there seems to be quite a few people enabling him. Why? Do they think they're going to get something too? Maybe. Look at Pompeo, for instance. I mean, it's not as if I've never heard this argument before. Oh, with a warming Earth, all that ice will melt along the Northern Passage area. We'll have a Northern Passage, which we have already. And we'll be able to have a trade route and yada, 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 and everything will be hunky-dory. So, I guess you're going to be rich when the whole world is burned to a crisp. What? These people are such fatalists. I'm going to do whatever I want because I'm just going to be dead anyway. What? I thought that they were the party and the movement of morality, reason, rational thinking, common sense. It was all a huckster jive. That's all it was. They're grifters. They want to make money. They say what needs to be said, and they know that people will respond to God and country. Yeah. They don't care about God, and they don't care about country. They hate America. They hate America, and more importantly, they hate Americans. Now, who they run around with, they all look alike. I mean, look at, they're almost stamped out of a production line. You can, oh God. But regardless, they and their little, what's the term? Silo. They are the Americans. Of course, every group has said that they were the humans. The root definition of most people's or groups' names, nations' names, cultures' names are the people, as if they are the only people and everything else is kind of like, what are they? Are they us? No, they're not us, so they must be something less than us. Always less than us. And I always presume that after a period of maybe, what shall we say, civilization, a civilized idea about how to be good neighbors, and the idea of the experiment of America, that we are all equal. Basic equality. We're all humans, right? That is now being torn asunder too. Why? That was a presumption. That's just a presumption that we're all equal, and there's a group of people who want to make sure that most of us are not equal, because if we are all equal, it means that it's taking something from them. Rather than all boats rising to a level, they feel that, well, if the water's rising, I should be on stilts and keep rising higher than everything else around here. Well, do it then. And put yourself in a gated community, and we'll keep you there. Okay, you can have your own strip mall supermarkets if you want that, or you can have like a really nice Macy's and Nordstrom's and a mall type setting. We don't care. Go to your gated community, stay there. We'll visit every now and then, okay? Wouldn't that be nice? God, if we could only have that sort of paradise. What's on the rest of the menu today here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Repug Dan Crenshaw, you know, the guy that wears the eye patch, because what was he, a Navy SEAL? He was something, Ranger or something, but he lost an eye or something happened to his eye, and so he wears an eye patch because it pulls really well. It does. Well, he wholeheartedly stands by his racist attacks that have resulted in a marked increase in death threats against Representative Ilhan Omar. The Minnesota GOP refused federal funds for election security, saying people are hacked all the time. So what if we're hacked? It's okay. And the National Urban League urged immediate action against Russian efforts to suppress the black vote. Well, you can rest assured that the Department of Justice is going to get right on this and shut down the Urban League like they shut down Acorn. How dare they? And after the break, we then moved to the chef's table, where 2 Reuters reporters walked free from a prison in Myanmar after 500 days for just doing their job. Yeah, they were doing their job. They got convicted under the Open Secrets Act, Government Open Secrets Act. And after that conviction, they were suddenly set free. Well, not suddenly, but it took a couple of weeks. But that's good news. And at least 8 people are dead as cops raid a Rio slum amid a sharp rise in killings by police. It's not always good news. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. I had a maddening experience yesterday. Went to my son's Facebook page, and I should mention he has a couple because, well, I'll explain here. Went to one of his pages, the one that mostly everybody goes to check in and offer condolences and say, hi, bro, I remember when we did this and that. And a lot of times I like to, just look at his posts and the pictures that he posted there and just whatnot. Well, one of his friends had reposted something that he had up from last summer when my son and granddaughter and nieces went to the Oregon State Capitol to protest Trump's family separation policy. And it got reported. And so Facebook and Zuckerberg and their algorithm and whatever, I don't know, their grand authority took my son's Facebook page away. I thought it was like impossible to get rid of him. Apparently not. So, now I should say that he had been suspended a few times for making provocative statements about Trump and things like that would get him routinely suspended. So he always had a backup account. And when he passed, he was mostly on his backup account. So I know that that's probably it. Oh, I had a backup account. Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff there. Can we have it? It would be nice. Especially since that's the page that the kids went to. My grandkids, his children. So there you go. Thank you, Mark. You're a princeling in your own time. All right. Oh, he bought some property in Hawaii. Good for him. There's a volcano there. A few of them. All righty. Let's get on with this. Let's get on with the rest of the show. If you would go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Go then to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will then notice the contribute link, or the link to the contribute button. I don't think is a button, but I like to say that anyway. It's fun. Very fun. But if you could please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you will be helping us purchase new machinery, not only pay the bills, but we're in a saving the money mode so that we can buy new machinery, because this machinery has been running continuously for quite a while. Not all 8 years. We had to buy some machinery in the midst of it. But this machinery is pretty much coming to its is way beyond its warranted life. In fact, I'm getting information. This is how you can tell how old the machines are. I'm getting information on the PC that Windows will stop giving support for Windows 7 because that's what I have on here. And then, of course, on the MacBook, well, it's been running continuously. It's the broadcaster. It never shuts off. So these machines have been doing stellar and great work. I suppose I just that was redundant, but regardless, they are soon to meet their demise, and we don't want to have it happen in the middle of a broadcast, and it could. So please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. If you could afford even a latte type coffee drink a month, put those proceeds our way. We have become masters. Is that the proper term? Well, we are masters at being able to stretch those dollars, and I have to say it's not rubles. We don't market in rubles, so thank you, because your contribution, recurring contributions, keep Resistance Radio resisting as the founders originally intended, and that was even before 8 years ago. And that's how long we've been continuously broadcasting 24/7, 365 of Resistance Radio. And thank you for helping us do that. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom is taking care of that, and he does such stellar and great work too there. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I then post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then put those links up on social media for ease of movement. Isn't that nice? If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Yes, we do. There's fresh corn in the chowder. That's why it's a chowder. Please. Okay. Dan Desai Martin at Share Blue Media brings us this first offering. On Monday morning, that would be yesterday, Representative Dan Crenshaw, a repug of Texas, in this reporter's opinion, by the way, said he wholeheartedly stands by his racist attacks against Representative Ilhan Omar, even though his attacks helped lead to death threats against her. In fact, when asked in a CBS News interview if he had any regrets about his actions and the subsequent death threats Omar received, Crenshaw blamed Omar for it, because that's what one-eyed ex-military types do. Blame the victim. It's almost like a genetic code embedded deep, deep, deep somewhere. But it's not. Anybody who would ever threaten a member of Congress is a horrible human being, Crenshaw said. But it is not anybody else's words that cause these things. It is her words. And you can't lay that blame on anybody else. Wait a second. I thought sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never harm me. And now he's saying her words. Her words are much more powerful than the sticks and stones that will, stone her to death? What the hell, Dan? Crenshaw was asked the question, but because he, Trump, and other Republicans shamelessly used the 9/11 terror attacks as a political weapon against Omar, who happens, of course, to be a Somali refugee who went on to become one of the first Muslim congresswomen in the U.S. Crenshaw promoted a video of Omar talking about anti-Muslim bigotry after 9/11 to dishonestly imply that Omar was dismissing the importance of 9/11 and she was not doing anything of the sort. If anyone is diminishing the importance of 9/11, has been this crew of right-wing grifter whatevers. I can't even come up with the proper pejorative. Repugs. I think encapsulates that feeling quite well, actually. Lisa Needham, also of Share Blue Media, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I don't know what it is about the GOP. I do. I have my suspicions. And I'll repeat this. I know it's becoming a broken record. Remember when we even had records? Regardless, they, as a party, I think from top to bottom, from dog catcher all the way up to the top there in the Oval Office, are awash in Russian rubles that have been laundered from the NRA. And it doesn't take much to make them want to obstruct justice. They were able to sell out their country for just a few $1,000s. All right. Well, Republicans in Minnesota are refusing to allocate federal money to combat election hacking because, as they say, people are being hacked all the time. In the wake of Russian interference in the 2016 election, Congress appropriated $380 million to the states to increase the security of elections. However, Minnesota requires that the legislature must vote to accept the money. It remains the only state in the country that has not accepted this federal funding, which amounts to $6.6 million. And I got to say, that's a lot of money in Minnesota. Inexplicably, the Republican majority in the state Senate has only authorized the allocation of $1.5 million, even though Minnesota was one of the 21 states targeted by hackers during the 2016 election, and it worked so well for the Republicans, they want it to happen again. They cannot win fair and square. They have to rewrite the rules, and then they have to rewrite the rules that they rewrote. What's the term for a coup that happens over decades? What is that term? The person most responsible for blocking those funds is Minnesota's former Secretary of State, Mary Kiffmeyer, who once served as the state's top elections official and was responsible for election security. So it's her fault then, eh? Kiffmeyer, who now chairs the Senate's Committee on Elections, would rather focus on the imaginary threat of in-person voter fraud because black people might be coming from another world to vote in our elections. And she would rather deal with that than the very real threat of hackers infiltrating her state's election system. She has blithely dismissed concerns about election security. You're being hacked all the time. I am, she said. This is no big thing. Really now. Equating the non-political hacking of individual computer users with a widespread attack on the integrity of the state's election system is absurd, and Kiffmeyer knows it. However, she and her fellow Republicans are holding election security funding hostage to force Minnesota to become more restrictive about voting. That's because Kiffmeyer believes the real problem with voting is that Minnesota needs voter ID, because if more and more black people and more brown people and more yellow people and more people with long hair and more people with short hair and more people with tattoos and more people without tattoos and more people with kids and more people without kids vote, it would be exceedingly difficult for a Republican to hold on to power. Sam Fullwood III of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Adding his voice to a crescendo of complaints about Russian interference in both the 2016 presidential and the 2018 midterm elections, one of the nation's most prominent civil rights and urban advocacy organizations decried efforts by foreign agents to use social media outlets to suppress voting turnout among Black Americans. In his State of Black America 2019 report, released yesterday Monday morning at a news conference in Washington, D.C., the National Urban League said that state-sponsored Russian activists fed into the nation's simmering racial antagonism in an effort to tamp down Black voters' confidence and dissuade voting participation. Well, I guess because the Russians saw how well it was working for the Repugs all this time, they thought they could offer some help too. And they did. During comments made at a news conference, CEO Mark H. Morial said Black voters were targeted because Black Americans have exercised political strength over the decades. Since the passage of the voting rights laws in the 60s, what's more, he noted, the nation is rapidly becoming more racially diverse, which could lead to greater Black voting participation. Efforts to suppress the Black vote have coincided with a rapid diversification of the voting public, Morial said. The projected 2020 electorate is 66.7% white, down from 76.4% in 2000. No wonder the Republicans are afraid. Well, let's get to our break. And when we come back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and then finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Air conditioning and fans account for a full 10% of the world's electricity usage. Or, to put it another way,
it's a lot of air that you pump around.
Roland Dittmeyer, a chemical engineer at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany. Another thing that takes a lot of pumping air around, he says, carbon capture.
Because the concentration of the CO2 in air is evidently quite low.
Even though it's enough to cause climate change, it's only 400 parts per million. So he says, why not retrofit air conditioners with modules that capture carbon? Several companies already make materials that strip carbon dioxide from the air. You'd then need to convert that captured CO2 into hydrocarbons. That's an energy-intensive process. But Dittmeyer's vision is that we'd use clean, carbon-free renewable energy to power that step. Do this on a large enough scale, and you could produce significant amounts of this synthetic renewable oil. Dittmeyer and his colleagues calculated that if you outfitted the AC system of the Fair Tower, a large skyscraper in Frankfurt, with these carbon capture devices, the building's units alone could produce an estimated 15,000 barrels of synthetic oil a year. The full write-up in the journal Nature Communications is called Crowd Oil, Not Crude Oil. And if the idea gets traction, it could transform the devices that cool our homes and offices into machines that help cool the planet. Or at least stop warming it up while chilling us down. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
The great thing about corporate giants is that they are such amazing business innovators. For example, in the category of wheel-spinning innovation, i.e. trying to change a corporation's course without actually changing anything, it's hard to top McDonald's. For several years, the fast food chain has been losing customers to younger chains with healthier, more stylish offerings. So, CEO Steve Easterbrook has tried to recoup the losses with PR tricks, such as calling the menu healthy and fresh. But a McNugget and fries are still what they are, so people have not bitten the PR bait. Now, though, eureka! He's hit on an innovation that'll surely cause hungry eaters to flock to the Golden Arches: artificial intelligence. Yes, exclaimed Steve the innovator, consumers need a robotic order taker to advise them on what to order, based on AI's ability to digest unlimited data about the weather, traffic, time of day, and what other people are ordering. Decision technology, it's called, and the CEO spent $300 million to buy these so-called thinking machines, which the maker claims will provide, quote, the rapid and scalable creation of highly targeted digital interactions. Now, what could be more inviting than that? Easterbrook adds excitedly that his innovative deployment of this artificial intelligence network will provide, quote, an even more personalized customer experience. Sure, Steve, nothing like more computers to add a warm personal touch to make a meal more appealing. This is Jim Hightower saying, far from helping customers, McDonald's snazzy new AI ordering system will be helping the corporation by silently compiling personal information on you, ranging from your movement patterns to your license plate number. McDonald's says it'll use the technology to make the most of the data collected.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1867. That was the day that shoemakers founded the labor union, the Knights of St. Crispin, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. St. Crispin is the patron saint of cobblers. In the 3rd century A.D., Crispin and his brother traveled what would become France, preaching the gospel. They paid their way by cobbling shoes. They were martyred for their faith and were venerated as saints by the Catholic Church. By selecting this name, the fledgling union connected with a proud heritage of shoemaking. After the Civil War, the shoemaking industry was changing in the United States. A trade that had long been practiced by skilled craftsmen increasingly became industrialized in large shops and factories. The union was formed in response to these changes, and it quickly grew. The lodge, started in Chicago, quickly enlisted some 600 members. Within the first year, there were 87 lodges, mostly in the Northeast and Midwest. Within 5 years, there were between 40,000 and 60,000 members in nearly 400 lodges. The Knights had become the largest trade union in the United States. To keep members informed, they published a monthly journal. They fought hard against wage decreases and worked diligently immediately to stop the hiring of green hands, or unskilled labor in the shoemaking trade. This effort was not successful, as shoes became increasingly mass-produced. In 1872, a strike by some of the Eastern St. Crispin lodges was brutally crushed. A nationwide depression that started in 1873 further eroded the Union's strength. The numbers fell to only about a third of the Union's previous strength. Yet, through defeat, the Knights had demonstrated the potential of nationwide trade union organizing.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
There's a whole lot of scrambling going on over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin on Monday said his department would not meet the Democrats' demand for 6 years of the president's tax filings, saying it lacked a, quote, legitimate legislative purpose. House Democrats say the returns are part of necessary oversight, while the administration has rejected the request as part of a politically motivated witch hunt. This will likely end up at the Supreme Court.
We just heard from Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin that he will not fulfill that request for 6 years of the president's business and personal tax returns. That request coming from House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal, who had requested this information using an IRS section known as 6103 that he said gave his committee the power to ask for this information. This is, of course, breaking news and escalating this fight for the president's personal and business tax return information. Now, Richard Neal has a few options. He can basically sue and say that the Treasury Department is not fulfilling their legal obligation for this information, or he could file a subpoena on top of that and then go to court that way.
More than 500 ex-DOJ officials have signed on to an extraordinary open letter saying if he weren't president, Donald Trump would be facing multiple obstruction of justice charges. Former federal prosecutor Jennifer Richards explains why she signed on.
I signed the letter because I want people to know what the Mueller report found. You know, no one's reading it. All they're hearing is headlines and what Bill Barr says about it. But this obstruction case against the president is an easily chargeable and easily provable case that would have been brought against anyone else. And that's what I think people should know.
How did the letter even come to you?
I got it from a former colleague of mine from the Southern District of New York. I think it just kind of started making its way around people who used to work at the Department of Justice. But now that it's public, I think a lot more people who hadn't had a chance to hear about it before will probably sign on.
Who's signing the letter? Left, right, center, all of the above?
Everybody. I mean, certainly probably more Democrats than Republicans, I would say, but people who worked across all administrations. I think I read that it started with Eisenhower, actually, and, all the way up to very recent former federal prosecutors. So certainly some prominent Republican names in there.
William Barr's refusal to appear before the House Judiciary Committee on Thursday and his refusal to turn over the unredacted Mueller report to Congress have prompted Congressman Jerry Nadler to schedule a vote on whether to hold Attorney General Barr in contempt of Congress. CNN's Manu Raju has more.
It says this in the report that they plan to vote on in committee, that William P. Barr, Attorney General of the United States, shall be found to be in contempt of Congress for failure to comply with the congressional subpoena. Now, in this report, they argue that the Democrats need this information, the underlying evidence, as well as the unredacted portions of the report to help with their investigation into the president, to help with any potential legislation that they need. They say that this is necessary in order for their oversight, legislative or constitutionally warranted responses. Now, that last part, constitutionally warranted responses, hints at that one thing that they could do in that committee, move forward with articles of impeachment. They're arguing in the sense that they need all this information to determine what they should do to deal with the president, the accusations of obstruction of justice, to determine whether or not they should go down that route of impeachment, which we know at the moment the Democratic leaders don't want to go. But now they do plan to hold the Attorney General in contempt, something that could set up a court fight that could take some time.
The Department of Justice is pushing Nadler to backtrack from the vote scheduled for Wednesday, trying to negotiate with the House Judiciary Committee to find an alternative course of action. The two sides are expected to meet sometime on Tuesday to negotiate over everything from Mueller testifying to allowing the leaders of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees to see the unredacted Mueller report and more. Stay tuned. A new landmark report from the United Nations paints a bleak picture of the planet. It warns 1 million of the nation's 8 million species face the threat of extinction because of us. Humanity's ever-growing population and seemingly insatiable consumption are destroying the natural world, according to this report. The global rate of species extinction is listed as, quote, tens to hundreds of times higher than it's been over the last 10 million years. Shrinking habitat, exploitation of natural resources, climate change, and pollution are the main drivers of species loss. And that's not the only recent bad news to come out. Another study says permafrost is melting so fast in the Arctic that it's increasing the amount of greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere and damaging the equipment scientists use to measure it. If you're wondering what the official administration line is on the melting sea ice, this is really Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Steady reductions in sea ice are opening new passageways and new opportunities for trade. This could potentially slash the time it takes to travel between Asia and the West by as much as 20 days. Arctic sea lanes could come the 21st century Suez and Panama canals.
No, I'm not kidding. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. President Trump threatened to escalate an ongoing trade battle with China, tweeting Sunday that tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese goods would rise from 10 to 25% unless China agreed to a trade deal by Friday. That threat came as negotiators from both countries reportedly closed in on a deal.
I think that President Trump has really revealed a pattern.
Gary Huffbauer is a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics and says Trump also threatened tariffs on Mexico days before wrapping up negotiations on a new NAFTA deal. Citibank analysts have even coined the phrase trade war today, trade deal tomorrow to describe Trump's habit of issuing threats just before reaching an agreement.
I think that's a fair description, but I would say the chances of a trade war increased dramatically. I would have put them at 20% prior to President Trump's tweet, and now I'd put them at 40%.
Steve Supan is the senior policy analyst at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy and says those odds have American farmers on edge.
I think it is fair to say that farmers, rather than agribusinesses, especially transnational agribusinesses, are suffering more immediately from the U.S. Trade Representative's strategy in the Chinese negotiations.
Supan says American farmers spent years increasing soy and pork production to meet rising Chinese demand, only for China to place 25% retaliatory tariffs on those commodities. And while some of those farmers received a share of $12 billion in federal trade mitigation payments last year, that program is now canceled and their outlook is uncertain.
Only the really deep-pocketed farms where they already have inherited machinery, inherited land, they can survive. If you're a farmer who's dependent on renting land and are in debt that you can't service, you're in great, great trouble.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit, looking to top out at a high of around 83 to 84. Should have, pretty much low to mid 80s through the rest of the week, though we do have a forecast of some sizable rain showers coming in early next week, and we can only hope, at least I do, My corn is sprouted and it's growing quickly. I'm liking it. Yeah, corn is a fast grower. Now let's see if I've done the proper planting techniques in which that corn won't flop over. Because if you have to support corn, it's just more work for you, isn't it now? The corn is there to support other crops like your beans. Beans are supposed to grow with corn. They fix nitrogen, don't they? All right, back to the weather. Looks like overnight lows will be in the mid to low 50s. Though last night it wasn't so bad. Okay, let's see. So right now, if I can just scroll down here, yes, I can. Grass pollen is high. Air quality index is 24 parts per million in the good range. And that daytime UV index is still high, but it has gone down 1 gradient to 6. Interesting. Barometric pressure currently is holding steady at 29.84 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 72%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 63 and partly cloudy. Paris is 65 and sunny. Rome is 68 and fair. Kiev is 63 and fair. Kabul is 74 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 69 and cloudy. Tokyo is 55 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 58 and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 64 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Simon Lewis and Shun Yang of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 2 Reuters journalists jailed in Myanmar after they were convicted of breaking the officials' secret act walked free from a prison on the outskirts of Yangon after spending more than 500 days behind bars. The 2 reporters, Wa Lon, age 33, and Kwa Soi U, age 29, had been convicted in September and sentenced to 7 years in jail in a case that raised questions about Myanmar's progress toward democracy and sparked an outcry from diplomats and human rights advocates. They were released under a presidential amnesty for 6,520 prisoners on Tuesday, which would be today. President Win Myint has pardoned thousands of other prisoners in mass amnesties since last month. Well, how did these guys get in there? Well, maybe someone heard what should have been obvious in the beginning. It is customary in Myanmar to free prisoners across the country around the time of the traditional New Year, which began on April 17th. Reuters had said the 2 men did not commit any crime and had called for their release. Swamped by media and well-wishers as they walked through the gates of Insan prison, a grinning Wa Lon gave a thumbs up and said he was grateful for the international efforts to secure their freedom. The 2 were then driven away by Reuters colleagues and reunited with their wives and children. Before their arrest in December of 2017, they had been working on an investigation into the killing of 10 Rohingya Muslim men and boys by security forces and Buddhist civilians in western Myanmar's Rakhine state during an army crackdown that began in August of that year. The operation sent more than 730,000 Rohingya fleeing to Bangladesh. The report the 2 men authored featuring testimony from perpetrators, witnesses, and families of the victims, was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for International Reporting in May, adding to a number of accolades received by the pair for their journalism.
Je te donne seulement l'amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. At least 8 people died when police raided a drug-scarred Rio de Janeiro neighborhood on Monday. That was yesterday, amid a sharp jump in police killing of suspected criminals in the state that underlines the tough new security measures favored by far-right President Bolsonaro. The raid began around 11 a.m., according to local media, and triggered a massive shootout between police and suspected gangsters. TV images showed a police helicopter hovering overhead as the gun battle emptied out local schools, with pupils fleeing through the streets. In a statement, Rio Civil Police said the operation was aimed at detaining Tomás Gomez, known as 3N, a suspected drug baron. There was a resistance from the criminals, and 8 suspected traffickers were shot and killed in the confrontation, the statement said. 3 others were taken to the police station, including one of 3N's personal security guards and 3N's wife. The number of people in Rio killed by police hit a quarterly record of 434 during the first 3 months of 2019, up 18% compared with the same period last year. The first quarter tally was the highest since state records began in 1998 and comes as the number of statewide murders has fallen. Rio Governor Wilson Witzel, who took office on the 1st of January, has urged police to take no prisoners in the battle against drug gangs, and even suggested during the campaign using helicopters with snipers to take out gang bosses. Wow, while the kids are running through the streets trying to keep from getting shot too? Who cares? Over the weekend, Twitzel tweeted a video of himself on board a police helicopter during a police raid on gangs in the city of Angara de Reis, south of Rio. Wow, he wants to be a Duterte. He wants to shoot people too. Witzel's views echo those of Bolsonaro, a former army captain and federal lawmaker who represented Rio State for nearly 30 years. And he has also long advocated tough measures to kneecap violent gangs and quickly moved to loosen gun laws after he took office at the start of the year. Nonetheless, his flagship crime-fighting bill languishes in the Congress, and I wonder why. Now, the fallen murders is attributed to the growing nationwide dominance of the First Capital Command Gang, better state policing methods, and the deployment of federal security agents to some of the country's most violent states. Well, this is something that we'll want to follow because police killings on the rise anywhere in the world is bad news. All right, we're going to have to get out of here, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays indeed. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.